So good afternoon, everybody. It's amazing to be back here in El Salvador again for our second time at the Adopting Bitcoin Conference. We're so grateful and excited to return, and it's especially exciting since recently El Salvador has announced their decision to embrace nuclear power as part of their long-term energy strategy. And if anybody is following the events at the COP29 conference, El Salvador, in fact, just signed on to a pledge to triple global nuclear power capacity along with 30 other countries. So for those of you who haven't met me yet, my name is Heidi MacLeod. I go by the Nuclear Bitcoiner on X and Nostr.
And I'm Heidi.
Yeah.
And I am not on X.
Yes. We work in the Canadian nuclear industry at Canadian Nuclear Laboratories, and we are very passionate about the idea of integrating nuclear power with Bitcoin mining.
Full disclosure, however, our ideas are our own. We do not represent the company today, and we do not give financial advice.
Yes. Our intention and the theme of this presentation today is to elaborate on the complementary effects that we believe will emerge when Bitcoin intersects with humanity's ability to harness atomic energy.
So despite both Bitcoin and nuclear power being at the forefront of technological advancement and energy transformation, both face significant opposition built upon fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Admittedly, there are certain risks when engaging with nuclear technologies, but it has been subject to narratives that rely on exaggerated hazards with radiations to people and environment. Nuclear power has endured FUD for many decades, so much like Bitcoin, we understand that battle.
Yeah, but before we can address how Bitcoin can apply, we first want to give a brief lesson on nuclear fission and what that even is. So ultimately, it's the process of releasing the energy contained within the nucleus of heavy atoms like uranium, which are found in nature as different isotopes. So if you can recall from chemistry class, the elements are defined by their number of protons, but now isotopes are defined by the amount of neutrons they have. Here we have 3 different isotopes of hydrogen atoms. So the protium is just hydrogen with no neutrons. Deuterium has 1 neutron. Tritium has 2 neutrons. So almost every element has multiple different isotopes that have different configurations. So some isotopes are unstable and they naturally undergo nuclear decay, which is where they release alpha, beta, gamma, and neutrons. And some of them are naturally occurring, while some exist from the process of nuclear fission. The isotope that we're most interested in is uranium-235. It's the most commonly used fuel for nuclear power that's generated with the fission process. And when a neutron interacts with a uranium nucleus, it becomes unstable, it splits into smaller elements, it releases more neutrons and an immense amount of energy. This energy is then captured by a fluid like water or a molten salt, gas like helium, and then is transferred to a steam turbine to generate electricity. Then the emitted neutrons, they either induce another fission reaction or they get absorbed by the reactor to ensure a 1-to-1 ratio. And then this just here is an image of the fission yield. So the smaller elements that are released when the atom splits are referred to as fission products, and they split roughly around the atomic mass of 95 and 137. Most of these pose little to no hazard, but there are some that do. And that is why nuclear fission byproducts are the most safely and heavily regulated industrial byproduct by far of any other industry. The IAEA has oversight over almost every single microgram of uranium that is in the nuclear power industry. And then these are examples of the storage facilities that we will be using for nuclear waste. So it's securely stored in shielded casks on site. And then these are strategies for long-term systems that focus on safety and accessibility for future generations. Some of the reactor types that are available today may even be able to reuse these byproducts to generate more power and other isotopes that can be used for other use cases.
So since the discovery of radiation and fission, the 2 most known uses for nuclear power have been electricity and weapons. But it's also been harnessed for other peaceful means, such as medical procedures, archaeology, agriculture, hydrology, and more applications that we have yet to discover. For now, let's stick to power generation. Its benefits are numerous, providing abundant, affordable, and clean energy in the safest, most reliable way we know how, although public perception has not been favorable towards it since the Fukushima accident. But that is changing. Nuclear power is being reevaluated around the globe as part of a decarbonization and energy security efforts. As Ryan mentioned earlier, it is exemplified by the 24, now 31 nation pledge at COP29 to triple nuclear power capacity and other recent announcements with expressed intentions from big data companies to power their hyperscale data centers. So parallel to these developments, vendors of small modular reactors, or SMRs, have been persistently marching forward towards technological readiness, promising to greatly expand the market for nuclear power. SMRs are smaller and more agile, but are they worth it? In recent years, SMRs have been getting a lot of hype for their potential to displace hydrocarbons as a source of heat and electricity in smaller markets and microgrids, like remote communities. Their novel features include passive safety systems, modular fabrication, they're easily transportable, they have longer refueling cycles, and faster construction. The potential benefits are numerous and could significantly improve the living standards of many around the world. However, the SMRs are still years away from being proven, and there are dozens of designs at varying stages of readiness.
So where does this leave us with the development of these potentially game-changing sources of energy? Well, we have an interest because our company is interested in microreactors. In Canada, our action plan outlines a strategy to deploy small reactors to the remote north to replace diesel power in isolated communities and industrial sites, a strategy that could essentially be replicated in most markets around the globe. However, in the studies conducted to assess the feasibility of deploying only SMRs to power a community or industry, the economic case is negatively impacted by the presence of stranded capacity. And that stranded capacity means the energy that is not being used productively. The reason that stranded capacity exists is because you need to install, in order to be reliable, you must install sufficient capacity to meet the peak demands of a community, even though that peak may only present itself for a few days of the year. Plus, you need a buffer on top of that. So typically, this is met with a combination of baseload generation and peaking generation. But since we are trying to address this without hydrocarbons, our options for peaking are limited. So we are proposing that with nuclear power and Bitcoin mining, and by using Bitcoin as a treasury reserve asset as the foundation of these microgrids, we could meet the electricity, heating, and financial needs of any community anywhere. So solutions that rely upon solars and wind and batteries, they have their merits, but to enable energy abundance for the greatest amount of people for a high-tech society, nuclear power is essential to meeting humanity's needs. Yes. And when measured on the metrics, this is for you. Yeah, you go.
My turn. When measured on the metrics of power density, safety, land use, material use, emissions, and reliability, nuclear energy comes out on top as the apex energy source to empower our technologically advanced and growing civilization.
Yeah. I messed up on the slides.
Yeah, you did.
Yep. I lost track of my slides.
Okay.
Let's get to,
You did that.
all the benefits of it. Okay, now here we are. So, despite this, there are many challenges to overcome. And as described in a recent nuclear financing report by the International Atomic Energy Agency, nuclear power plants are complex projects that require alignment across many stakeholders, and the economic life cycle of a nuclear power plant project can span more than a century, requiring a very long time horizon. The main phases encompass the initial planning, licensing and development, construction, operation, and decommissioning. And at some of these stages, large sums of capital can remain tied up for years before the project even begins to generate revenue, while some of these funds and endowments must be preserved and added to over many decades. And the two primary factors impacting the feasibility and financial stability of nuclear power investments are capital costs and the cost of capital. As you can see from this graph, this is the breakdown from the Hinkley C reactor in the UK. 2/3 of the cost of building that reactor is interest alone. So if we can find better financing strategies, we can significantly lower the cost of building these things. So the requirement for such a considerable upfront investment is highly sensitive to the changes in cost of capital, and delays in construction times will result in a higher amount of interest being accrued, which in this case is almost 2/3, but in averages out to be almost 20% of the total cost in many instances. So this report goes on to detail a range of financing mechanisms that the government that are used, such as government backing, public-private partnerships, offtake contracts, and other financing instruments, such as bonds. The, yeah, the, where was it? The report, yeah, they explore the combination of these strategies from a traditional framework that is predicated on a fiat standard. But we are here in El Salvador, the Bitcoin nation, where exploring the possibilities of what it could be when viewed through the lens of a Bitcoin standard is supported and encouraged. Initially, we had intended to speak primarily about how Bitcoin mining can be used as a flexible off-taker and a supplementary heat source for SMR microgrids. But as we've learned more about the broader nuclear financing landscape, we've realized that mining is not the only role that Bitcoin can play in facilitating the development of nuclear technology. So by contemplating different ideas like using Bitcoin mining as anchor loads, modeling fundraising strategies like the volcano bonds, or using the fact that block space is going to be a highly sought after scarce resource, we can begin to see the early stages of what could be a whole new realm of potential ideas for financing the proliferation of nuclear power. But let's start with mining. Yeah.
So anybody that has listened to a few podcasts about mining or listened at length to someone like Ryan, who's fascinated by the process, has by now heard the common tropes about Bitcoin mining, improving grid stability, monetizing stranded power. It can go anywhere, it can scale any size, it can synchronize with any load profile. Its flexibility is its superpower. This is what makes it unique from other big data centers. A few key properties that Bitcoin mining is like a load of no other. It's interruptible. It can reduce or increase power usage dynamically in response to common grid signals. It's location agnostic. It's scalability, density. It's dematerialized, so digital products have no physical storage or transportation constraints, allowing generators to immediately realize the value of their output. It's a non-rival. It's a load that does not compete with critical consumers. And it's a low-grade heat, so many markets can benefit from electric heating at various scales. So when we speak about Bitcoin mining with a nuclear-centric audience, this is the obvious go-to argument. The idea of building small nuclear power plants profitably in small or off-grid markets is faced with an obvious challenge of achieving 100% utility of the asset. Overbuild and leave capacity stranded, compromising economic viability, and underbuild, and you require hydrocarbon backup anyways, defeating the intent of displacing the hydrocarbon use. So with the ERCOT flexibility, Bitcoin mining alleviates this issue by offering a digital conduit to realize the value of stranded power. By operating in parallel to physical power infrastructure, transformers, and power lines, etc., mining's unique load profile allows them to be a right-sized off-taker in any environment, paying a global price for power that anybody, anywhere can. Whether it is through a joint venture or self-mining, utilities and power plant owners in remote locations can now use mining to amortize their fixed costs across more consumers, making them more profitable and allowing them to connect more people to power at a lower cost. What Gridless is doing in rural Africa is a perfect example of this. Underused hydro and geothermal plants were unprofitable and needed to charge high rates to locals, which is an unsustainable model. By mining Bitcoin with the power that would otherwise have been wasted, this now offers lower rates, putting money back into the pockets of those who need it to invest in what is most meaningful to them. Mining can also be applied in ways that evolve in sync with the energy demands of the local environment, easily adjusting over time to the right size for each stage of growth.
Okay, yes, but there's more that Bitcoin can offer than just mining. Recent successes of energy bonds dedicated to nuclear power projects highlight a growing market appetite for nuclear investments. Ideas that are being pioneered by El Salvador's volcano bonds can just as easily be applied to a nuclear power project by raising funds to hold as Bitcoin reserves, by committing generation capacity towards hash rate, and offering Bitcoin redemption option to the bondholders. By tapping into Bitcoin as an investor base, a new model for financing energy projects in the digital age is emerging, reducing reliance on traditional lending institutions and decreasing the burden on ratepayers. So Bitcoin's effect on time preference is very complementary to the long-term investment mindset required for a nuclear power plant's century-long life cycle. Its store of value properties offer these projects a range of benefits at various stages of their life. So in the pre-construction phases, a portion of the early capital can be set aside as a reserve to offset the effects of inflation on the fund's value in the multi-year period that precedes the construction phase, or a commitment to future hash rate could be used as a means of pulling future revenue forward, reducing the debt requirements. During the construction and commissioning phase, that reserve can be used as collateral to cover unexpected costs during the construction, offering flexibility to adjust budgets without requiring extra funds. Any appreciation of the Bitcoin reserve can then be used to contribute to servicing debts, thereby reducing the impact of the interest accrual over this critical phase. Then, as part of the operation and fuels, during the operational phase, part of the fund can be used to develop Bitcoin mining infrastructure as part of the overall energy system. The revenue can then be used to cover expenses and add to reserves. By receiving payments for electricity as Bitcoin, they can add to the various capital pools and cover their operating costs. And in some cases, the appreciation of the reserves and the mining profits can be applied to employee pension contributions or bonuses and rebates for the local consumers. Then, as a legacy community fund, a portion of the reserves or mined Bitcoin can be set aside for community initiatives that will establish a legacy relationship with the area hosting the nuclear power plant through multiple generations. These Bitcoin endowments and trusts would be entwined with the community's energy prosperity, and they will adding socioeconomic value by promoting positive incentives to invest and work in one's own community. Then, during the midlife refurbishments, because many nuclear power plants undergo refurbishments to extend their life and midway through their operational phase, a portion of these reserves could be set aside to contribute to these funds. By holding a portion of these reserves dedicated to a capital fund earmarked for future repairs and upgrades, it can preserve the value of early revenue for future use rather than relying on traditional funds at the present time. And then decommissioning waste management funds are a regulatory requirement as part of the licensing approvals, and Bitcoin's potential as a long-term store of value offers a means to hedge against inflation during this multi-decade phase. And then during the decommissioning phase, it can be delayed for many years because of the nature of radioactive decay. And the Bitcoin will be able to preserve the value of these funds during the lengthy site rehabilitation process. And then this is another one that I had about hash rate equity, because block space is scarce, and as more users increase the demand for the block space, some of these users will have a vested interest in securing predictable access to that block space. So by acquiring equity in a power plant that is mining Bitcoin, they could acquire direct access to that block space and be given priority access to that block space, giving them more predictability that is critical for their time-sensitive and high-priority transactions. So any power company, nuclear or otherwise, can benefit from having a well-managed hash rate portfolio as a key performance indicator, because a generator's ability to produce hash rate would be attractive to equity holders with transactional requirements. And in my opinion, this will be a great means of raising funds for nuclear power plants of all sizes. Yeah. And then as this starts to accelerate, we can start seeing it evolving into a nation-state hash rate. So because a nation's ability to secure their share of global hash rate will be predicated on their electricity infrastructure and their ability to generate power. So as one nation or a block of nations increases their share of hash rate, the share of others decreases. Max Kaiser calls it a hash war. Jason Lowery expanded on it in the software thesis. But the idea is simple. Nations and institutions are now going to be in a race to secure unimpeded access to block space and Bitcoin's time chain. So like, what does it mean to NATO that the BRICS nations are now supporting each other to deploy hash rate? Like, how are they going to respond in kind? Like, I believe that in time, as this hash race intensifies, the attractiveness of nuclear power will only increase once these entities have exhausted much of their existing excess power. Big reactors will offer large capacity volumes and security assurances, while small reactors will distribute hash rate broadly with the added effect of empowering people and industries in remote locations. What if it even intensified so much that fuel for nuclear power plants is sourced from nuclear weapons, prompting the deproliferation of nuclear weapons in the service of sustaining and acquiring more power for more hash rate? But that's the sort of thinking for decades from now. Right now, what can we do to prepare us to navigate this path to get there?
What comes next? We need to conduct comprehensive studies. Before engaging heavily with mining, the nuclear sector will need to see examples and studies that demonstrate the positive value of adding Bitcoin mining to SMRs. This chart shows that by adding a proof of work mining load to the OPG, Morocco, Canadian Nuclear Laboratory remote mine case study, the capacity factor is greatly improved. We have to monitor trends and build relationships. We're going to test in microgrids, so successful demonstration with real-world applications will provide invaluable data and confidence with utilities, policymakers, and investors. Then we're going to deploy, initiate a global chain reaction of nuclear deployments across the world. And of course, underlying all of this is education at every level, starting from small ages all the way up to our older generations. This is just a very quick slide on some of the positive impacts on the social and environmental aspects. So it enhances grid reliability, increases economic certainty, boosts investor confidence, provides a reserve asset for decommissioning and waste management funds. It's affordable, clean energy. And the health, well-being, and clean water and sanitation are all benefited and used with nuclear power.
Yeah, so to summarize, nuclear energy and Bitcoin mining will be important tools for unlocking prosperous and sustainable communities. After power comes critical infrastructure and essential services. By enhancing the viability of nuclear power plants as more than just an off-taker, Bitcoin can allow for the potential of power infrastructure that was once unimaginable.
Small modular reactors and Bitcoin mining, a powerful combination. Thank you so much.